football, the red zone is where a team has to make small adjustments to ensure victory. As you approach retirement, you also need to make small adjustments to ensure success. This is the Red Zone Retirement Program with registered investment advisor and enrolled agent John Mears of Mears Money Management.
Hey gang, welcome into another edition of Red Zone Retirement Program, Simple Investing, Smart Future with John Mears and myself here to talk about high net worth earners. If you're in this category, having a little extra scratch can be a good thing, certainly, but it comes with its own set of things to ponder and keep an eye on as well. And some myths that kind of go along with it as well is going to be on the conversation piece this week on the program. So stick around for all that good jazz. And we'll find out what John's, what his thought is on what is a high net worth individual. Maybe what kind of dollars are we even talking about? So it's probably a lot different than most people think it is. I think we think of something like this and we think somebody, crazy rich like Elon Musk or something. I don't think we're talking about quite that high. It probably might surprising what he sees in his practice. So we're going to get into that this week here on the program. John, welcome in, my friend. How are you? What's going on?
Doing great. Football season's winding down, but we're doing great. And I'm excited to talk about this topic today because I know people, that are investors think that they are not high net worth people, but some of them are, and they might not even know they are. So it's a great topic.
Great point. Yeah. So let's start right there. What's a definition that you might give or that you might see in your own practice of somebody who maybe qualifies as a high net worth individual? Is it $100 million? Is it $20 million? Or is it actually something more practical and reasonable? Many advisors I hear say folks that fall into the 1 to 5 range.
I use 3 to 5 million as that range. And I have people that are in that range.
Sure.
But they're, believe it or not, most of them are just regular people. They really are. They're not people that are living on yachts or whatever. They're regular people who've done a great job of saving, but they do have more unique needs than somebody with a $50,000 IRA. So sure, I do want to, I do address their needs a little bit differently than I'll address other people's needs. But yeah, I look at high net worth being 3 to 5 and then on up as well. But that's kind of my thinking. Other advisors might have a different definition. That's just me.
Sure. And I think that's more than fair. And I think also where you live is going to affect that a little bit too, right? Being in California, that makes sense. I was just talking with another advisor on the opposite side of the country about a similar topic, and they put it at that 1 to 3 range for them and their client base, right? So there's all those factors that kind of go into it. And yeah, to your point, right? Like, if you got a $40 million yacht, that's totally different conversation. Most of us don't fall into that. But there's a book called The Millionaire Next Door, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of folks that actually fall into this category that you would never know, because they're just regular, ordinary, fairly frugal people. So let's talk about some of the things. Let's kind of go through first. I want to go through some unique situations that high individual earners should consider. And you may already know if you are one or not, and you're checking out the podcast, and maybe that's why you tuned in, because you want to hear what we have to say about this. Yeah. You saw this topic as the headline. So clearly you mentioned it a second ago, John, complexities. There's going to be more complexities for folks with more assets or more holdings than there might be with somebody with just maybe a 401k, and one rental property or something like that.
Right. Correct. So the high net worth people, the portfolios will be more diverse. They'll be more complex, and they're going to be exposed to other types of investments too. There's going to be what I see with a lot of them is there may be an old business interest they may have that the family had, that they may have had. They may still have a partial interest in a business. That is something that most high net worth people do have, is some sort of interest in from a self-employment or from a business standpoint.
Maybe even multiples.
Yeah. Correct. Multiple businesses. And so part of what they're doing almost on a full-time basis is managing their businesses and managing some of their properties. And so we have to acknowledge that is a lot of work. They're dealing with their attorneys a lot on these things. And so we as advisors have to be available to these clients to make sure that, the lawyer wants this done, or we want that done, or there's somebody that's coming in, somebody that's exiting. There's just little nuanced things. They're usually not over the top crazy things, but things that need to get all, where people are trying to get all their ducks in a row. And so some people have even international investments and stuff like that. So people we have to take a little bit more care and understand that this isn't somebody with perhaps $1 million IRA where we have them in a portfolio that is just based on a little more simple distribution strategy. This one's where we actually have to do a lot of math and kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together.
As I say, there's more balls in the air to juggle, right?
Correct.
So it doesn't necessarily, and I do want to say this, because you being a smaller boutique firm, there's individuals who, even high net worth individuals, who want to work with boutique firms versus maybe a bigger office that is, got 20 people on staff. And a lot, folks out there probably have encountered this before, where, because we've gotten email questions before where it's like, hey, I only have this or this. Am I too poor to be worked with by a financial advisor, for lack of a better term? And there are some firms who say, hey, if you don't have an X amount of dollars, I can't help you, because that's what they've set up. But I think for a lot of boutique firms, it's like, you're going to get the same level of attention whether you've got, $1 million IRA and nothing else, or you've got, 20 different things that have to be juggled. It's still going to be handled with the same amount of care. It's just a matter of there's more pieces that need to be in your plan versus the other. Is that fair? Yeah.
And one thing I tell everybody, and it sounds corny, but I really do operate this way. I
Sure.
look at every single client as if it's my stuff. How would I be handling this? How would I feel doing this? And so somebody with a $1 million IRA, that's may be all that they have, but that is the most important thing in the world to them. And so we have to think that way. And then somebody with a little bit more complex issues, you got to make sure that, I look at, again, personally, you're going to get very personalized service from me as well, because I am a little bit smaller than some of those larger firms. And so if you call me and you say, by the way, my niece, this is what's going on with her, I'll remember who your niece was and how this fits into the overall picture.
Yeah, you're not a number, right? At a firm where you could still be a number, and there are definitely firms out there where the lower valued client that had, asset from an asset standpoint, maybe they don't get the attention that some of the higher net worth earners, get,
or they'll get the junior,
or they'll get the
advisor.
Junior accountant, right? And maybe sometimes it's not because it's lack of attention; it's just because it's just a simpler process. It doesn't require as many moving parts, because we have a simpler lifestyle. So bear that in mind for folks that, maybe feel like, hey, I don't get the attention that somebody with a whole lot of money does. We know the world works that way, but there's also sometimes there's valid reasons for it. It just makes sense. So let's continue on with some of the bullet points here. So taxation is going to be another one of these. Clearly, if you've got a simpler setup, John, handling taxes for somebody with a basic lifestyle and a basic tax situation is not going to be as complex as somebody that's got 10 businesses and a bunch of real estate property and this, that, and the other. Mm-hmm. There's just going to be more tax complications.
Yeah. And I'm an old tax nerd, as people know. I had a large tax practice for 20 years. And so I love that stuff. I love putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. Capital gains are obviously an issue with more traditional investors, distribution planning, trying to do Roth conversions as well. But when you actually have this property, and you are contemplating whether to sell or exchange this property, that's something that's important to have. We've talked in the past about perhaps life insurance be part of a plan, and trying to put all those pieces together. Taxes, they're the elephant in the room. I will continue to say that over and over and over. Taxes, whether you're small or big, taxes are where you got to go.
Right.
And
that's a
my
big old elephant. It's a big old elephant. All right. Estates might be another place where high net worth individuals need to have a little more focus than, again, if we have something a little more simple. I know my setup, John's going to be simple. We have one child, and we have, the one home, and I have, my business, and my wife has her, her work 401k, right? So we have a fairly simple setup when it comes to our estate planning. But if you've, maybe you've got, $5, $6, $7 million and multiple kids and multiple grandkids and this, that, and the other, that could change some things, right? So there's some complexities there.
And I always talk about, when we talk about estate planning, I always start with beneficiary planning. That's still the low hanging fruit, whether you're big or small. It really is. And I have clients where they'll have multiple insurance policies, or they'll have multiple accounts, or even multiple properties, and they want the beneficiaries, because nowadays you can basically have a transfer on death even for properties, where you can actually make sure this person is going to get this thing, and you can designate it, like I said before, the niece or the nephew or the grandchild or the old friend even. It could be somebody that you really want to designate. So the beneficiary designations are super important. And then again, trust. Sometimes there's going to be multiple trusts involved. Yeah. But those are things that, again, I try and use a little map that I kind of show people, a one-page diagram. We'll talk about this later, but this is something that helps a lot of people, making sure they kind of know all the directions things are going, so you can see what's going on. But it definitely is for high net worth people.
All right. So liabilities. Clearly, this is going to be one that certainly is going to be the case. It's a very litigious society. So the more you have, the more of a target you have on your back for someone to maybe want to sue you. So certainly with a high net worth person, you want to make sure that you have it. And maybe this is where trusts and things like that come into that conversation.
Absolutely. I was talking to somebody recently that was telling me that plaintiff attorneys have access to databases. With your social security number, they can find everything about you. So if there is an issue that is popping up and you have a high net worth, trust me, the other attorney will know that, and they will cause grief for you, whether you deserve it or not. And so that is why making sure that you have proper property and casualty insurance, because stuff happens. It just does. My wife just got in an automobile accident. She's safe. Everything's okay. But it was just a few weeks ago, she got in an accident on the freeway, and she's a safe driver, but stuff happens. And so this is why we want to make sure that we have everything covered. So liabilities are definitely, you want to make sure you're titled correctly. We want to make sure that we have adequate insurance. And then that's where we also use the trust to help. And again, that's the difference between a revocable and an irrevocable trust, maybe to protect some of your assets.
I'll throw out a quick little thing to talk about on this, and I won't spend too much time because I want to get through the rest of this piece. But I remember a story an advisor told me a couple of years ago, John, where his client, fairly well-to-do, doing pretty well, and he had an elderly parent who was still driving and things of that nature, but also had a teenager that was driving, and he had some things set up in place to prevent him from being the target of a lawsuit should his elderly parent hit someone or hurt someone. Same thing with the child, right? You have insurances, but they also had some other protections in place through a trust, because they had another client, family friend, who did not have that in place, and they were the target of being sought after for fairly frivolous lawsuit when something like that happens. So again, if you've got a lot of money, you probably got a target on your back. So it's certainly worthwhile to talk with an advisor about, okay, and an attorney, and having a whole legal or having a whole financial team, really. Mm-hmm. What do I need to kind of protect myself and my family from some of this, frivolity that runs around out there?
And you can lose this money.
Yeah,
it's possible. You could get sued and you will be found liable. And so imagine if you had $4 million and somebody took $2 of it.
Yeah. So not the government. So
yeah.
All right. So let's talk about a couple of myths that go with it. So we got the kind of categories, some of the big categories where maybe some extra focus is required. Now let's think about some of the things that we might find ourselves in if we're lucky enough to be, let's say we've got, $4 or $5 million, and you think, hey, I'm listening to this podcast and they talk a lot about rate of withdrawal, things like that. How much money do I need to pull out? I got $5 million. I don't need to worry about that, right? I'm groovy. I've got plenty of money. Well, how do you live, right? I mean, yeah, if you got Elon Musk money, maybe you don't have to worry about a withdrawal, plan. But what's your thoughts on that as an advisor? Do you think you should have a plan regardless of how much, assets you have?
Absolutely. Because sometimes some of your assets are illiquid. So you want to make sure that you have assets so you can get a hold of. And we've talked about life insurance as being part of a plan, but sometimes life insurance isn't accessible in the manner that you were thinking or hoping. Okay. And so we really want to have, as far as the withdrawal rate, this is also part of a bucket strategy where we kind of go, okay, what can we take and when can we take from that? And having kind of an ordering to that. So we want to have a withdrawal strategy. We want to make sure, again, the goal is to never run out of money. And sometimes you think, well, I've got $4 or $5 million. I'm never going to run out of money. But I've seen people spend quickly and spend a lot of money. So
sustainable is probably the good word here, John, right? What's a sustainable rate? So like if you're sitting there saying, okay, I got $5 million And let's just go like I got $5 million and my brother's got $1 million. He has to do the 4% rule. We'll just I'm doing air quotes for folks that are listening to this audio. We'll just kind of go with that as an easy thing because people have heard it. But I'm going to do 10% because I got $5 million. Well, is that sustainable for how many years are we talking, right? So
No.
A plan.
Yeah. When we talk about our distribution rates, those distribution rates are regardless of where you're at. I mean, it's so if we were looking at a 4 or 5% distribution rate, if you're going beyond that, you will run out of money. I don't care if you got $4 or $5 million, you're going to run out of money. If you're going at a 10% distribution rate, it's simply not going to last.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Right. So again, it's not a bad idea, even if you're sitting on a bunch of cash, even if you're Scrooge McDucking it, and to make sure. And if you don't know the Scrooge McDuck reference, you got to go look because that was great. He would swim. He would swim in his vault of gold. Right. So
yes. A quick aside to that, as far as having some money, because I deal with football players and I follow sports, we all hear the stories of these professional athletes that make money and next thing they spent it all. Yeah, because they've overspent. And they didn't have a plan and they weren't guided correctly. And now they're working and we see this where they're working a job. And you're like, I can't believe this guy is doing that for a living right now. Yeah. And it can be it's a sad, frustrating tale because the guy made perhaps millions of dollars.
Sure.
And didn't manage it properly.
Yeah. And this one's kind of close on the myth of this next myth here, John. It's you don't necessarily, if you're a high net worth person, you don't necessarily have to worry about creating an income plan, right? We often talk about if you don't have an income plan in retirement for us regular folk, that you don't have a retirement strategy. If you're sitting on a big pile of cash, again, if you're Scrooge McDucking it, do you really need an income plan? Well, maybe if you got $200 million or $200 billion, like Elon, maybe you don't, right? But I think even for that $4 or $5 million person, you probably still need an income plan.
Absolutely. Again, this just goes back to a distribution strategy. Again, knowing where you're going to take money from. You're going to have some market exposure at some point because we've talked about inflation. We got to beat inflation. And this sounds kind of funny. It sounds first world problems. And I totally get that. I understand that. But having $3 to $5 million is you've done well. You're in great shape. But you can screw it up. It's not so much money that you can't screw it up. Yeah. And so this is why we want to make sure, again, that we have a distribution plan. We want to make sure that we know where things are coming from. We want to make sure we understand market risk. We don't need to be overexposed to the market. And so just as we would with perhaps a smaller portfolio, we still want to be paying attention to the portfolio. Again, there's other complexities usually with high net worth people, with other properties, when to sell those properties. Again, when to exchange those properties, how to access cash from those properties. So there's other things that still go into all that. But yeah, we definitely want to have an income plan. We just want to.
Yeah. I mean, this is just, to me, is still the basics of financial planning and financial strategy, because John, your lifestyle and my lifestyle, while they could have a lot of similarities, they're also vastly different just from the fact of where we live. What it costs you to live and what it costs me to live are vastly different. How you might live versus how I might live could be vastly different, right? So even if you're sitting on a big pile of cash and you think it's going to be plenty enough to go around, you also are probably starting to live that way a little bit, where you're maybe spending a little extra money on things that you might not have done if you weren't in that situation. So it's easy to kind of let it spiral out of control, to your point about professional athletes or musicians or whatever. And I realize sometimes that we're talking like tens of millions there, but it can even happen for folks in that $3 million range. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So bear it in mind. So with that all said, John, how do you help high net worth individuals handle some of these unique issues?
Yes. Taxes.
How do you coach them?
Taxes. I hate to sound
so what I'm hearing, coach, is taxes.
So if you have, there's going to be a big surprise here, big shocker for everybody listening or watching this. If you have a lot of money, the taxes are going to be high. You're going to be in a high tax bracket. It's just so we want to do everything we can to manage those tax brackets, and that takes so much work. And you can't do this on your own. You simply can't do this on your own and do tax bracket management. That's something that we really fight for, work hard on, and it's a continuous battle. It's not something that's a one and done. Hey, we know where we're at, because life changes, things changes, markets change.
Tax
you sell properties. So much is going on all the time. So we focus on taxes. I still think that's the elephant in the room. That's where it can provide the most worth. That's most savings and real hard dollars that we can provide people. Yeah. And it's not a mistake to say that I can save people certainly 6 figures, but sometimes 7 figures in taxes. And I think that is that's adult money to me. Other things that we do is
just a little bit.
Yeah. So another thing, and I alluded to this earlier, I kind of do what we call an asset map. So we use some software that kind of puts it all together, but visually you can kind of see who's got what, both with income and also with assets, where your liabilities are and where they're connected. And we can actually do multiple asset maps if you have different interests with different people. So perhaps with a business partner or different properties. So that's something that I think is very important for a high net worth person because there's so much stuff going on. It helps to have it on one page. I know it sounds fancy to have a 60-page report. Most people that I deal with that are high net worth people don't want that. They don't want a 60-page report. They want it quick. They want it at a glance, and they want to know what they need to focus on. Yeah. So I try and simplify it for them. And I think if I'm going to toot my own horn, I think I'm good at that, is simplifying it for the high net worth people. We also, from a protection planning, we do semi-annual insurance reviews for property and casualty. I think that's important. We kind of alluded to that before. It doesn't work for everybody, but I'm always exploring advanced planning techniques. And we probably brought up life insurance before. If you're going to look at perhaps index universal life, that's something that can be used for a high net worth person where they can put some money in. They can have a death benefit. They can also access it for long-term care. And they can also take out withdrawals tax-free at some point. So you're kind of getting a whole bunch of things in for one simple technique. But again, that's not for everybody. And you don't use all your money for that either. It's a portion, a little part of an overall comprehensive, prudent plan to try and make sure that you never run out of money. And you also can leave a legacy, which is also important for the high net worth people.
Yeah. And that's really good to think about some of those different things, right? Because there's just so many of those little variables that can kind of stack up, and we focus, right? I mean, we can tend to lose focus because we feel like, I've got enough to take care of me and my family and blah, 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 right? We all have those kind of fun fantasies of, well, if I win the lottery, I'm going to give this person this and that person that. And that's exactly how we get ourselves into trouble. And so even if you're making a good amount of money and you've got a nice nest egg growing there, and you're a high net worth individual and you don't even maybe realize that you are one, and you're generous natured or whatever, it's really easy to kind of lose focus on that stuff without having somebody to help you map it out, guideline it out. Really, it's a game plan, Coach.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a visual game plan. And again, my job, I think, is to take those 60-page reports and simplify them to just a few. And I believe in visuals. I believe in giving graphics to people. So when I provide my income strategy using guardrails, I have a 1-page graphic that I show people. And so they can kind of see this is the range we can kind of live off of and handle. If they want to see their assets and their net worth, again, 1 page, very visual, simple to see. I think that's how most people think. So.
Well, so you think about the different levels out there. So if you've got a much more simplified retirement planning, strategy that needs to be put together because you've only got 1 or 2 buckets, income buckets, you may only have 1 or 2 taxation buckets, right? Where someone else might have 15 different income bucket streams and they need 15 different tax bucket, strategies or whatever the case is. So no matter what it is, make sure that you're talking with a qualified pro, get some help in that situation and find out if you're even in, what kind of level of help that you do need, because you may need a simpler plan. You may need a more complex plan. And certainly taxation is a huge piece of that. As a matter of fact, before we go, don't let me forget to remind you folks that if you'd like to pick up a couple of copies of John's book, there's a way for you to do that. John has a couple of free books, Diffuse and Tax-Free Retirement in California, that reveal exactly how you can experience zero taxes in retirement and overcome the IRS lien on your 401k, IRA, and 403b, which could threaten your future lifestyle. These are complimentary, so all you have to do to pick these up 100% free is just stop by rescuemyretirement.net. That's rescuemyretirement.net. Fill in the basic info and he'll ship those out to you immediately. That's rescuemyretirement.net for a copy of Diffuse and Tax-Free Retirement in California. So thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for talking about this conversation, John, a little bit. We always appreciate it. We'll probably come back around and do a more deeper dive on certain aspects. We kind of try to do some broad strokes, and then later on we kind of try to dive back into some individual pieces of it. But it's always good to have a game plan no matter what your level is, right, Coach?
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have a plan going in so you know what adjustments you need to make later. So it's always important. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what can you do? Well, you can book a chat with John. That's the first thing you can do. Stop by bookachatwithjohn.net. If you need some help to talk about these things, book a chat with John.net is a great way to get onto his calendar, or check out all the other tools, tips, and resources he has at mearsmoney.com. That's his main website at mearsmoney.com. And don't forget to subscribe to us here on the Red Zone Retirement Program on Apple or Google or Spotify or YouTube as well. And we'll see you next time here on the program. John, thank you, my friend.
Thank you. A lot of fun.
As always, we'll catch you next time right here on the podcast.
Advisory services offered through Mears Money Management, Inc., an RIA registered in the states of California and Texas. California Department of Insurance License number 0685203.